So, Trevor and Melvin, I want to first say hello and thank you for taking the time out of your day to chat with me and really more importantly for having the desire to share your story with others. I think your story is an important story and one that needs to be shared and heard. And so I really appreciate you taking the time and your willingness to do that today. So first, I want to start by saying thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, So I know your story has some, twists and turns. Um, but wanting to start a family, the decision to have a family and start a family is a big decision for anybody. Can you tell us a little bit about what was behind that decision for both of you and a little bit about your story of, kind of through the twists and turns and what brought you here today?
Yeah, so for us, we got engaged on the 10th year of since we started dating. And then after we got married, the first question from all our relatives and friends are, okay, you're gay and then you're married now. Like, what is this it, or what's your next step? And for us, we actually have been contemplating to have family, and then that with and actually we got engaged so late and then married so late. Partially was because where I'm from originally, Taiwan, actually only allowed gay marriage a few years back, and that was the motivation where I thought, oh, if we can legally get married here and it could be recognized back home, um, that's something that I want to celebrate. So that kind of is like the everything kind of just started getting kicked off due to that, and then one event led to another, and then we started on our surrogacy journey right after we got married. But it took a while. We thought it's like, oh, once you have the funds prepared, everything is just step A, B, C, but it
Quick.
wasn't really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I do think that so many people just don't understand the process. From making the decision to wanting to have a family and saying, okay, I want to start the process to actually getting to the first transfer with the surrogate. How much time was that for you both?
I think it was at least a year, right? Probably a year to a year and a half. Yeah, it was during COVID, so there are a lot more restrictions then, but it was a lot longer process than we thought in general.
It was a
Okay.
year and a half
Yeah.
before, yeah, the egg donor part, the IVF part or creating embryos, took about 6 months to a year. The first IVF, we didn't have enough embryos actually, so we did another cycle. So for us, it took close to a year before we're ready to transfer. And then just because you have embryos doesn't mean like you have a surrogate waiting in a box for you, right? So it I think it was a year and a half in before we were able to do a transfer.
Mhm.
So I mean, you are bringing up some of the questions that I have, so I appreciate that. I love that. So you chose a donor first, it sounds like. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't even consider finding a surrogate at that moment. You were waiting to have embryos, or did you start both of those processes at the same time?
We started the process at the same time, but we told our surrogacy agency that we did not want to start opening up our profile until we're ready and have
Okay.
and yes.
Mhm.
So it was done in phases. I think that was really smart. That's great. Which part was harder, finding a donor or finding a surrogate?
I think finding a donor was harder because we were ready, and then I just remember going through there's so many different sites and going through so many different profiles. And at one point, we're just thinking, well, this is going to be part of our child. That is a really difficult decision. And at one point, I remember my husband was just saying, like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready, like after going through 1,000 profiles. So
Right.
it was very hard.
Yeah, I would say like there's more options. You kind of have to take the initiative to go through all the different profiles on your own. Whereas I would say for surrogacy side of things, you're matched with them. You don't go through that. So I would say it was easier for us to, the surrogacy side was a bit easier. The egg donor side was a lot more complicated, a lot more things to filter through, a lot more decision making.
Okay. And when you so you it took about a year and a half to get to transfer,
Mhm.
and that transfer was successful?
Not successful.
Okay. So that transfer was unsuccessful, and then tell us what happened after that.
And then we basically had to wait again for another transfer, which was probably 2, 3 months after that.
Mhm.
And then the second time, that transfer was successful.
Fantastic. And so you've got a little one now.
Yes,
How
he
old?
a year and a half now. He just turned 18 months 2 days ago. Three.
Yay. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
And
he's here now, but he's at daycare.
is that daycare? Okay. Yes. That gives you the chance to do this, actually.
Yes.
Okay. And then how long did it take for you both to decide we're ready for number two?
We had always kind of gone back and forth with that. We realized through our first experience with our first child that there are so many unpredictable variables that it's not something that you can actually pinpoint and decide, like, I'm ready, let's do it. Because from start to finish, the first experience, it was 2.5 years
Mhm.
before we actually, he was delivered. And so we said, hey, if we're ready, if we have the embryos ready, if we have a circuit match, let's just go for it. We'll just see how things fall into place on their own rather than trying to control the timeline as much. So we were ready. To be honest, we still don't feel ready sometimes just because, we get overwhelmed with just one. But we know that, it only gets harder as we get older. So,
Yeah. Well, and coming from someone who has two boys myself, I can tell you that some of those things actually become easier with the
mhm.
second one, and they kind of help each other. But you're right, you're never really ready. So it's just about, if you're committed in your heart to knowing that
Mm.
that's the decision you want, then it's about just moving forward.
Yeah, that's always kind of the vision we had for our family as well. One DNA child of each, so that it would be fair and also, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because like at the very beginning when we started this, we were all thinking like, oh, we're gonna time this, like they'll be born around the same time and things like that. And then later we're like, okay, they're gonna be Irish twins if it's within a year. And then now we're like, okay, it's like really what's given to you. Like
Mhm.
just because we have the technology doesn't mean it's always successful every time you transfer. So that's we've we're really humbled by our experience so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's I think I could appreciate that sentiment of trying to like understand it, and I'm hoping others could, because we all want to control as much as we want in the process, and try to plan as much as we can. And sometimes in situations like this, there's we've got to give in to the process and let it all fall into place. And sometimes it's not what we planned for,
Right,
right?
right.
And it sounds like some of that is also what brought you to utilizing YourEggs as a donor agency. Um, it's a big decision to find the right donor and find the right fit for a donor agency for you.
Mm.
Um, what, how did you get to choosing YourEggs as your donor agency, and what brought you to us?
Well, after we realized we needed to create more embryos, we started just searching all sites possible online. And then we remember that there was conference about men having babies. So
Mhm.
we kind of went onto that site to see like the list of egg donor agencies that, you know, other gay men have used before. So then there were more than just a handful, right? So I click through half of them and then just kind of glam through as much as I can. So really, it's by chance, but also at the same time, some agencies had some YouTube videos and some blogs, and YourEggs happened to have some YouTube videos. So kind of got me feeling okay, this agency is more prepared, and browsing through the profiles, it seems like it's a lot more entries than other agencies. So um we were able to narrow down to a few donors that we felt like we could consider.
Mhm. Mhm.
So when you say entries, you mean there was a lot more options in terms of choosing a donor at YourEggs than previous agencies you looked at.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
And
more options, and then also I would say the user friendliness of the website itself
Yeah.
helps a lot. We had friends before who kind of browsed through other agencies, and we looked with them, and it's very some of them are very, you know, the websites can be very dated, but also the customer service behind it, you know, is almost non-existent. uh,
Mhm.
and we liked your eggs because it was easy to chat with a fan. We wanted to set up, you know, potential meetings, you know, FaceTime meetings with the egg donors, and you know, although it wasn't common, she made it happen. Whereas we know a lot of other agencies that our friends use, it was kind of like, nope, anonymous. You know, you don't even get to talk to them over the phone. And yeah, I think the transparency, the user friendliness of your eggs definitely made us feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioning just the personal touch, the ability to communicate and have a point of contact who was there to respond to you and deal with your individual needs and requests, I think is really valuable and important. And the contrast to that you mentioned that's not always the case at other agencies.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so I appreciate hearing that. I for sure one thing that is definitely not the case at other agencies, and I would say for sure not the case with many donors either, is their willingness, like you mentioned, to set aside some time and have a connection with you both and meet via Zoom. And I'm sure you both want that because you wanted to feel some sort of connection and make sure this was the right choice for you all. So I can appreciate that. So what was that experience like? Because it's not common, and certainly you have to get the donor to approve to that, which might not always be the case. So what was your experience with that whole process?
I feel that because um, what I really liked about your eggs was that uh, our the agent that was helping us, she knew that we're not first time egg donor, you know, recipients.
Mhm.
So she knew how to adjust and then kind of support us differently from other clients. So that type of detail or that type of attention was really appreciated. So it made everything else very easy. And then to our experience speaking to our donor, it was particularly great because the agent also helped set up the call, not only setting up the call, but also like uh, ask the right leading questions so that we can help understand each other on both sides.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I wish that sort of thing could happen a little bit more frequently, and it doesn't, understandably, because it's not the right situation for everyone. But I'm super happy that you both were able to do that, and it worked out. Um, you know, this process can be a long process, as you both are aware from your previous experiences, and can be an emotionally difficult process and challenging on many fronts. Um, is there some advice that you would give to other gay men watching and listening that you think like, oh, these are the key tips, like these are, key advice that I would want everyone to know when they're listening, because it is a difficult process, and can be challenging and long, so what would help others out a little bit more?
We have a lot of things that we picked up along the way. So many. I would say off the top of my mind, whenever we have gay couple friends that ask us about our experience, my number one advice is always to try to actually keep that between you and your partner as much as possible until as late as possible. Yeah, we found out in our imagination when we think of, oh, we're pregnant, or we're starting this process. For straight couples, you see movies, TV, it's always like, oh my God, we're gonna do this together, we're gonna plan this. But we found that in our experience, we didn't have that same reaction from family. It was totally not predicted, but when we shared that, oh, we're pregnant, the first question actually was like, whose baby is it? And so that to us was such a huge wake up call, like, oh, I see that, it's not seen as the same way for
Mhm.
couples having a baby. And so I think managing that, and always making sure that you, as your partner and the family you're creating, is number one, is super, super important, because there are outside variables, whether it's friends or family, that unintentionally, they don't mean it, they don't mean it in a bad way necessarily, but it's just the first question that comes to mind for them, and
Mhm.
is dividing sometimes. And so it's
Sure.
good to be careful of things like
And
that.
even after the baby's born, the first questions we get at parties is like, who is the real dad? Like
Mhm.
that, it doesn't make us feel like it's our family. And
Right.
I don't think people ask with ill intention. They're just naturally curious.
Mhm.
However, it could be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
I can understand that. I mean, and I'm sure it sounds like you both didn't even expect that, uh,
No, no
as
idea.
questions. So maybe you were not prepared to be able to answer that
Mhm.
as a unit, right? As a couple, like, oh, what's going to be our answer for something like this until it happens. So I think having that advice is super valuable.
Yeah, and then also,
Mm.
to even rewinding back to when you're saying, as a gay couple, well, we're starting the process. I think friends and family, their intention is to help, but then they might end up crossing some lines. In our experience, in our friends' experience, they start throwing, "Hey, why don't we ask your sister to use her eggs, or why I have a certain friend, or I have your cousin, you can ask her for eggs." And it was kind of alarming to us, because we were like, whoa, we didn't, once they propose those, it's kind of put on to you as a family, as a couple. Oh, how do we say no to this? Are we going to offend anyone? Whereas, it's much straightforward in a straight couple having couples. No one asks questions like that. No one imposes those ideas onto you. So
Mhm.
it's very good to be aware of that, and to prep for those questions in advance, because they will get them.
Yeah, those are really valid questions. Sorry, points of advice, and the those suggestions by friends and family are surprising, and probably, you're, as you mentioned, right? Well intended,
Mhm.
but it throws a whole different dynamic into the process that you wouldn't have thought about previously. So I appreciate that. Any last minute things that you want to share, either about your story, or another piece of advice that you'd like to share, before we wrap up?
I think just going into mentally, for gay men to have babies, uh, again, we can't all play God, and being mentally prepared that a lot of times what we read and what's celebrated, it's those like, oh, we do it once and we're successful type of stories. But I think a lot of people still share experience where it's a long process, hard, difficult, but have to always be very positive, and then know that uh, you know, it's not easy, and like what you see all the time, but
Mhm.
a lot of people probably share the same experience and they're on the same journey with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to again, thank you both for taking time to share your story with me. I appreciated hearing it. I'm sure others will appreciate hearing your story and your advice. But also from the YourEggs agency, how much we've appreciated working with you and supporting you both in creating your family. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you.